So today we're talking about African cichlids, all things Africans. So as you guys all know, Ryan is a big breeder of Africans, and I quite like Africans and sell a lot of them. And Cam has a lot of history with them, so we thought it'd be a good place to start. So probably I'd say the most popular place to start would be. I'm gonna say the most popular place to start would be the Mbuna. I'm not sure. There's probably peacocks is often mixed in there as well, but I'd say things like your yellow labs and like your Demasoni and stuff like that is going to be the ones that a lot of people kind of throw in that 3 foot tank, and that's their first kind of foray into Africans. So yeah, I mean, I I don't know. In my opinion, I'm not 100% sure that's kind of the best place to start for one, well, for a couple reasons, but I think the kind of main problem is I think you'd want a bit more space to if you've not kept them before, just in terms of management of aggression and all this kind of thing. And the other thing as well that comes with them is with your things like your dams or Demasoni, you often find, if you put like one or like a couple in, there will be like little terrors, just fight. Whereas I think they're better suited in a bit larger of a group in that tank. And obviously, the more you want, the more space you'll need. Otherwise, you're going to just run out of room, and you'll be done adding fish in 2 minutes. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I'd say that's probably the most common place to start. I don't know if you've found people start in different places for your particular interactions with them or whatever. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of where I'd say most people start, and what I think is probably the most common trip up points on those. So yeah, I don't know if you want to go next, Ryan, and kind of dive into your experiences and with people coming to buy fish from you.
So are we talking Mbuna or are we just talking Africans in general? What are we talking?
We're just like starting where people start for you.
Okay, cool.
If you find that's Mbuna or you find that's Frontosa, whatever.
Most people I find end up starting the wrong way by accident. They buy Demasoni. I don't know how we pronounce Demasoni. I was just googling that, but it's all right. It doesn't matter how we.
I'm Team Demasoni. I think Cam's wrong.
I think it's Demasoni.
Well, I think I don't care.
It's all right. It was named after a guy, Leif Demison or something like that. I think his name was. He found them, but anyway, they usually buy something like that. That's cool. That's blue. That's vibrant, and stick it in a tank that's too small, and then try and mix all sorts of other stuff with it, and it ends up being a disaster. So yeah, that's how I find a lot of people start, and that's how I started too. Bought a tank with all sorts of random fish in it, and then it just turned into a nightmare. Ended up taking me ages to get rid of them and start again. I do agree that Mbuna is probably where most people start, probably with yellow labs, because they're pretty much everywhere. The ones you'll find everywhere aren't exactly great yellow labs, but they're kind of yellowish and they're kind of lavish, so people go for them. And yeah, they usually end up in too small a tank with too few fish because they're trying to save money. They're trying to buy as minimum as they can. They don't want to, I don't know if this is going to work, so I don't want to spend much money on it. I want to spend much, invest much in it. And then they often end up running into some trouble and then either giving up or reaching out to people that can help them.
Yeah, makes sense. What have you found anything different, Cam? Like any other different starting points for people, or do you agree it's more Mbuna starting point?
I'd say Mbuna because they're more common than most, and they're straight off the bat colourful compared to peacocks and haps need a bit of growing time. And I think, like I was trying to think of when people how people start. I think Ryan's right. They'll have a AR980, for example, and a tiger barb and a platy and a bristle nose, and they go into the shop and they see this really cool full yellow, or maybe even a red zebra or something like that. Take it home. One fish dominates everything, and that's the kind of starting point for Africans for a lot of people, I think. Or maybe they've got a tank of cichlids already, like Oscars and that kind of stuff, fire mouths, and decide that, again, they've seen this really bright, colourful Mbuna and they want to chuck it in there as well because it's a cichlid and all cichlids go together. I haven't found many people that dive into African cichlids with the full research mind to start with, and then that's the area of interest straight away. It's always seems to be tagged onto something, and then I've made a mistake, or these don't quite work together, expansion sort of scenario.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. That's usually what I've found too. And then they delve into it. It's sad because I think a lot of people give up on it because they end up having failures. And we also don't like ethically putting fish in tanks where they're going to be murdered. It's just not a
exactly.
It's not really a nice thing to have happen to.
Yeah.
I mean, Nirvana always wondered if it's okay to hurt fish because they don't have any feelings, but still they are living animals that we don't really want to get murdered. So
yeah, exactly.
We'd like to see people be successful with them for the hobby, but also for the fish themselves. So
yeah, I just realized we probably should expand on what exactly we mean when we say Mbuna, and like what the differences are. So like Mbuna would be things like, for example, like your yellow labs or like your Demisoni or whatever these guys want to pronounce it as, and those sort of, they are more sort of cave and rock dwelling fish, like in the little crevices and that kind of thing, and their diet is more algae and like veggie based rather than proteins in that. So yeah, that would very briefly and very basically be the main kind of differences to something like a peacock and a hat, which is going to be more of like an open water swimmer. So yeah, and then I thought next we could kind of discuss what might be the better way to start, and like how to keep Mbuna if that's where you're wanting to start, and kind of how to meet their needs. So what I kind of recommend for people is they start with like a 4-foot tank, which would be like around, I think, like 250 liters or so, of so like 120 centimeters long, and you want to start it off with, I always recommend just like an aragonite substrate and just some sort of big rock structure if you're wanting to do Mbuna. Or it can be driftwood, but like some kind of structure that provides sort of like that cave and like crevice area for them to kind of weave in and out of. And then always with Africans, the most important thing I think is just like numbers of the fish. You want to always overstock, which basically stops them picking on any one fish in particular. All the sort of weaker fish in that just get lost in the shuffle and they kind of just ignore each other. It just helps stop that aggression issue, which is, I'm going to say, the most intimidating thing for someone to approach if you're, not new to Africans and everything like that. But yeah, and then aside from that, I think Mbuna is a good place to start because they're a lot cheaper. Obviously, you can go into the rare stuff and it gets expensive, obviously, but you start with like your yellows or like your Demisoni or I can't think of any other examples of fish. But that, yeah. That kind of stuff is all very cheap and a lot kind of easier to dip your toe in that way. So yeah, that's kind of, I mean, basically it. It can be pretty simple if you want it to be. So yeah, I don't know what you guys think. If you have any other things you want to add to that, or places to look at in that, but yeah.
Yep. No, I think 120 centimeter tank's the key, 4 foot. A lot of people have 250 litres, but it's going straight up and down. Like this tank behind
Yeah,
me,
exactly.
350 litres, which is the same as like an average sort of 5 foot, but it's only 4 foot long because it's ridiculously tall, you know. The key thing is they need territory, you know, like the males are going to go, this is my space, you know, and he's going to take that space and that's his forever until someone else challenges him. So, and he's going to chase
Exactly.
everyone away. And if a tank's small, there's not much rock work in there, he's going to take the whole tank as his space, and that's the end of it. There is a lot of talk about no substrate at all, no decor at all in the tank, creating no territories and creating less aggression. But I've been experimenting.
Surely that would stress the fish out, not having anywhere to call their own, nowhere to hide if needs be, sort of scenario.
Most of the
rock dwelling fish, not open waters.
Yeah, most of the big breeders don't actually use a lot of rocks, but they use 12 foot, 15 foot vats with 400 fish in them, so that they have a lot of space and a lot of numbers, so which we can't actually. It's very hard for us to create in a fish tank. So
I think commercial breeding is a different conversation to general hobbyists, of course, as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yes, I think the best thing to do is to add, 4 foot tank, 8 to 12 yellow labs, get some cycled media, kick it off, start off with them, and then wait a month or two, and then add some blue with your Demisoni, your Mapanga, your dwarf sort of Mbuna. Stay away from the Metroclima. They'll probably be all right in that size tank if you can do decent numbers, but they're a bit hit and miss. Definitely not okay in anything smaller than a 1.2, but
I think
makes sense.
The aquarium size is key. Like anything under 4 foot, and you're going to be pushing your luck and or setting yourself up not to be successful, just straight off the bat for the best part. And then again, the second part of it is the amount of fish that you have in there, like the amount of people that sort of got African Cichlids, got 5 fish in their tank, and there's always one dominant male destroying everything else, because that's just their nature. And they're not hard fish to look after if you set them up the way they want to be set up, with lots of other fish around them to disperse their energy to.
Yep, I agree. And there's nothing wrong with starting off with smaller fish in a smaller tank as well, but you do have to actually have the commitment and the intention of upgrading. It's not just, as soon as people go out and buy fish off me, oh, I've got this, if they've got a tiny tank, I just say no. But if they've got like a 3 foot tank, I might be like, oh, yeah. Well, are you going to upgrade? Yeah, you're going to upgrade in the next 6 months. I say, cool. Well, you need to, or you're going to end up with a bunch of dead fish, So I don't know how many do or don't, but I got a message from someone that bought some fish with a photo the other day. He's asking if they can add more, and they had a little tank, 165 litres, which is just a grow out basically. And the fish looked awesome, the photo they sent, but they were only little fish in a little tank, and they would have got big. So I said, no more fish, upgrade either way.
Yeah, I think also there's a bit of a misconception there. I've got African Cichlids, they're still really young and everything's getting on fine, but none of them have kind of hit that juvenile adolescent point where they like to, flex their muscles basically, because that's when everything hits the fan. In most cichlids, as they become sexually mature, but still these little fish, everything's going fine. They're great with my guppies, whatever, for example, but they haven't hit that point where that switch gets flipped.
I find a lot like people in that situation is like people mixing them with like Americans and stuff, and even some of the more aggressive stuff like green terriers and like flower horns and whatever, mixing say a bunch of peacocks or boners or whatever and with that, and it's working for now, but long term, it's not gonna work. There's very, very low chances that you're gonna have no problems. And I just don't think it's worth it. Like, I think overall, I'm generally not a fan or like an advocate of like mixing the different groups. I just think it can work, but it causes a lot of problems if you're not, super closely monitoring it every day. Because with them, it doesn't take a lot, for kind of it to go bad, and you obviously don't want it to kind of ruin the hobby or ruin the niche of Africans for you if it all of a sudden one gets angry and starts eating everything or whatever. um I just don't think it's kind of worth the risk. But it is semi doable, but yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend it personally.
And all Africans are relative. Well, I'm sorry, all Lake Malawi Africans I've found are usually pretty easy to keep. Like they're fairly undemanding. They're very hardy. All that sort of stuff. You just need to go into it with your eyes open and do a little bit of research. That's about it. And
Yeah, exactly.
Cam mentioned mixing them with Americans and other cichlids. A lot of shops say a cichlid's a cichlid can go in a cichlid tank and chuck them all together. But I've read a lot of articles, sort of studied a lot of their behaviors, and a lot of their aggression and territorial, and I guess the language the fish use to communicate with, hey, I'm the boss and you're my bitch or whatever. How they back down, how they interact with each other is actually different between the different groups of cichlids. So like an Oscar might try and fight with a Mbuna, and the Mbuna will be trying to say I'm the boss and back down, and the Oscar will take that as a territorial threat, but he won't know how to actually back down. So they essentially just keep fighting because they don't know how to talk to each other. They're talking different languages, they're from different countries type thing. Again, it's not something that I've really observed or tried to observe, but it sounds like an interesting sort of thing. And they are different fish and they behave differently, so it does make sense to me that will be a consideration.
It's two different fighting styles. Like
Exactly.
African Cichlids, like a bantamweight or a welterweight that are just bang 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 constantly, just jab after jab. Whereas the Americans are big heavyweights and just going in for one or two big knockout blows and then swimming away again type of scenario. So it's completely different fighting styles when they get into that situation as well.
Yeah. And Africans are hypo little buggers. They're always swimming around everywhere. Your Oscar will just chill. He'll be like, what's going on here? So and your male African cichlid's just been like pretty much all fish just put on this earth to breed. So all he wants to do is to be the biggest, baddest male in the tank and breed with all the girls. So he's going to carve out his territory. Any male comes into that territory, they're going to be a threat to his breeding, so he's going to chase them off. Especially more so if they're males of the same species, because they already or look similar, And then if a girl comes in, he's going to try and breed with it. If he can't breed with it, he's going to chase it off because it's a waste of his time. So, that's basically how they work. You put lots of fish in there, so he's got lots of fish to chase. Well, that's it. They're put on this earth to breed. That's all they do. They eat to breed. Everything they do is to breed. So,
yeah, man.
Yep.
Sounds like a fun life.
So that's kind of a bit of a basic rundown on particularly Mbuna. But what would you say would be the key difference for a hobbyist between the Mbuna and like the peacocks and haps? And so like peacocks and haps would be things like your OB peacocks, electric blue haps, I don't know, German reds, Kidangos, Venustas, this kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, what would you say is the most important differences for the general hobbyist?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of differences really. Diet, aggression, size. The key distinction here is a couple that you mentioned. I'd actually almost slide into the Mbuna category sometimes because like your OB peacocks were created by crossbreeding a Mbuna and a peacock and then line breeding back, and so are your dragon's bloods. so they can actually exhibit quite high levels of aggression, and be quite tough fish. So you do have to watch those ones. But the difference is, a lot of peacocks are open water fish. They like to be swimming out in the open, not around rocks. Although things like Jacob Freiberg's actually breed in caves. So, there are a few exceptions. It's all about looking at where they come from and what their natural environment is. The males are usually also way more, obviously there's really colourful Mbuna, but the males are usually really a lot more colourful. And it's a lot easier to mix a lot of males together. Again, if you stick a female in there, they're all going to fight over her. So that's where we end up with the all-male peacock tank. Haps are, again, another consideration. It depends on how big your tank is as to which haps you actually end up going with. We've talked about living stone eye, polystigma and things like that. You can get some that get real big and real mean, and then a lot of them, some of them stay a bit smaller and a bit more placid, like your Taiwan reefs and things like that. They still get big, but they don't get huge, and they still eat stuff, but they don't eat real big stuff like the polystigs and that. So I'm struggling to try and define the difference as a definition.
I always sort of broke them down to the Mbuna with a slightly smaller one, your peacock haps were your sort of middle size, and your peacocks your middle size, your haps are slightly bigger. Just as a bit of a general rule, I know there's always exceptions to the rules, but that was always the way that I kind of tiered the sizing structure of the three sort of groups of them.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then the other general thing I always say as well is, like, with the peacocks, it's very basically, it's like the same fish with like just different colors and like patterns and stuff. Whereas with the haps, you get like more variation in size and like variation in like body shape. Like you get something like an electric blue that's like real long and skinny, like top to bottom. Then you get something like a blue dolphin, which is like obviously just a big chunk with a big golf ball attached to its forehead, basically. So there's a bit more variation there. Again, I know that's not 100% true, but for the purposes of someone who knows nothing about Africans, that kind of definition will steer you in the right direction at least.
And also diet, like, if you're keeping peacocks and haps, you can get away with a lot more in terms of diet than you can with Mbuna. You can find a diet that they'll all eat, but you should be looking at more at a diet that's more suitable for the fish that you are keeping. So if you keep them, they tend to be more omnivores or carnivores, the peacocks and haps. There are a few Mbuna that are actually omnivores as well, that despite the misconceptions, like yellow labs are actually omnivores, not vegetarians, but haps and peacocks generally will eat most foods quite happily,
Yeah. I think that's the best thing is like, because all the time on like Facebook or whatever you see, oh, my fish won't eat this, my fish, I can't get it to eat this. But I find with peacocks and haps, well, with Africans in general, just food is their only real requirement. Like they'll eat it. It might not be good for them, obviously. So like that's kind of the hobbyist responsibility to like feed them good stuff. But they'll eat anything. They'll eat rapashi, pellets, flakes, your finger, anything you want, basically. So it's another one of those ones where it's like it takes a bit of the pressure out. It's like you can feed a lot of variety, and they'll take it, whatever it is.
Sorry, Karen.
Oh no, I was going to say the other thing I find kind of important to remember about peacocks and haps is just I think they require a bit more patience to get the most out of them. Even like the real colourful, say 4 centimeter ones that I get in to sell sometimes, they're like real colourful, but you wait till that fish doubles in size, and then it's just like absolutely like knock your socks off colourful and like bright and active and all this kind of thing. Whereas like the Mbunas are like, they still will get more colourful, but I don't think it's on the same kind of level of change. Yeah. And I think that's something that people kind of forget. Like, I get people in like see my display, and they're like, "Oh, I've never seen fish this colorful in that," and it's like, because it's hard to like wait for that, I guess, because it might take 6 months to a year or whatever, depending on what you got. But it is definitely worth it. Whereas some people just chuck, if you want instant kind of gratification almost, just chuck Mbuna in and they'll be like pretty close to what they'll look like when they're double the size of what they are now. So I think that's the other important thing to remember is like just because they look kind of like they're kind of cool, but not that bright now, doesn't mean they're always going to stay like that. Or you can just buy big ones and then it doesn't matter. But
yeah, I think patience is key, and I'd probably also recommend that most people have 2 tanks.
Yeah.
Like a big display, and like you probably get away with a 2.5, 3 foot tank type thing, just a smaller tank. And that's where if you buy something smaller, you can actually put it in that smaller tank, grow it up a bit before you can add it to the big tank. Always adding big stuff to the existing tank is hard though, because the fish there currently, they currently know who's boss and they know who's the next boss, and Nigel and Trev and Scott, they all know where everyone stands in their tank. So if you chuck someone else in, they're like, "Hey, who's this new guy? We don't like Cam. Cam's a dick."
Oi.
But if you chuck Cam and all his mates in at the same time, then and they turn around and they see a different fish each time, and they chase a different fish, and then they're like, "Oh, cool, yep," and that gives the other fish a chance to actually settle in, and then get used to the water and the food and everything else before they, and then to fight their way into the tank.
You've brought up a good point. How do you introduce new fish into an existing aquarium? Is there a way that you prefer to do it, or a way that you found more successful than others?
Yeah, I mean, ideally the best way to do it is to rearrange the tank and introduce them at night, and to introduce more than one, usually like 3, 4, 5, 6 if you can, But if you do it at night, at least they get a chance to sort of, when you stick them in the tank, they're all dazed and confused, and everything's a new place. You've just, they've been in this washing machine all the way home, getting smashed around, and someone's chased them around with a net, and then got to spend an hour or 2 in the car, and then it's different temperature, it's a different pH, and everything else, and I'm a little bit shell shocked. And then the first thing they do when they go in a tank is Nigel swims up to them and gives them a hiding. It's not going to work very well, but at least overnight they can settle.
I have a bit of a process that I kind of have worked out just with like practice with selling fish to people, of kind of how I tell them to add them, and I found it to be kind of the most kind of foolproof way of doing it is I tell people to drain the tank down 50%, then excuse me, that's gross. Drain the tank down 50%, then rearrange all the stuff, like the decorations and that. Then get your filter ball out of the filter and like squeeze it out in the tank, so like the remaining water goes all gunky. And then add 3 or 4 plus fish at once, and then fill the tank back up, and then leave the lights off till the next day. I find that is like, because obviously then there's so much going on for the fish, they don't even really care that there's new fish, because they're trying to figure out where their new territory is now. And then by the time all the gunk settles and like the lights come on the next day and everything like that, they don't care. They're like, "Oh, okay, this is just how it is now." So I've found that's kind of the most foolproof way of doing it. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones, everyone has different theories, but as long as there's a lot going on for the fish, I find that's the most important part. However you achieve that, but breaking up the territories and like not letting them notice as soon as you put the fish in and all that kind of thing, is easier. So yeah.
And if you get stuck, you can just chuck a blanket over the tank, make it dark, and forget about it till the morning. Because if they can't see each other, they're not going to kill each other. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So you can let that fish have a chance. And again, that's where your next tank becomes important, or isolation box or something, because if it really does go to crap and you see a fish swimming around with no fins and hanging up the top of the tank and looking terrible, you can net it out and actually give it a chance to recover, and then try later to reintroduce it at night or with other fish once it's recovered. Some fish just never work in some tanks.
Yeah, won't be
Tell
accepted.
me about it.
And you've got to accept it sometimes that fish, it doesn't mean that like all blue dolphins are going to be a-holes.
You know exactly
or
what
weak,
I'm going to talk about.
yeah. It
I
doesn't
have-
mean they're
I
all
have-
like that, but some personalities just don't fit in some tanks, so you've got to choose a different one.
I have this one big, beautiful blue dolphin that no matter what I do, he just does not stand up to this other blue dolphin that's like probably a third of his size. No matter what he just doesn't bloody defend himself. And so I just have this massive, gorgeous fish that keeps getting beaten up by this tiny little blue dolphin. It's the most frustrating thing. So he's currently sitting in this other tank with all these peacocks that are like, I don't know, 4 or 5 centimeters, and he's like probably like 12 centimeters, like happy as. But no matter what I do, he can't go on my display. Otherwise, he just sits there and lets this other fish beat him up. So that's frustrating, but it happens. So
Yeah,
he can live out his days with all these tiny little fish and think
and
about what he's done.
that's where a good relationship with your breeder or your pet shop comes in handy, because if a fish doesn't work in your tank, you can take it back to Cam and he'll do your deal on something else, or come see me or whatever and swap it. And
But
again,
he's so beautiful, I don't want to get rid of him.
but you just picked up some more dolphins, put one of them in, see if that's better.
I actually do have I think I have like 5 or something in my display tank now, but
yeah,
I want
you want that one. Yeah, he is a cool fish. He's a cool fish, but he's just a sook, So
he's just a big softie, and that's okay.
and-
He can hang out with all these tiny little ones and be the boss.
And you get that. So you just have to be aware that no matter even the best planning, stuff sometimes doesn't work. So
That's how I find African cichlid keepers never have one tank. It's like a display tank. I mean, like a lot of people have the grouts and that, but you end up with like 4 display tanks, and it's like just an addiction in a good way. There's worse things to get addicted to.
It's because this won't go with this, and this won't go with this, and I've got this tank, but now these guys won't go with this, so I've got to have another tank, and it just rolls.
Yeah, it's like the only logical solution is a new tank, not a maybe I shouldn't get this, which is good.
But that's
Keep
not
doing that.
That's not to say that it can't work in one tank if you're well prepared and you've got some stuff in place. Like if you buy or make something that you can separate a fish out into, you'll be a lot better off when it happens. And also if you know the signs that something's gone wrong, and you can actually intervene.
As an aquarium owner, I disagree with you. I think the only real option is buy more aquariums.
I just don't want people to think that to have African Cichlids, I've got to have like 10 tanks. I mean, that's a good outcome, but
you don't have to have 10 tanks, but you should have 10 tanks. It's much more fun that way.
Oh yeah.
So I thought next maybe we can discuss something that is. Oh well. I was going to say something that is Ryan's absolutely favorite thing in the world. And so I was going to say I thought next we could discuss Tropheus. So Tropheus are a bit different in that, so everything we've talked about so far is Lake Malawi stuff, fish from Lake Malawi. Tropheus are from Lake Tanganyika. But I think the easiest way to describe them is they behave a lot more like the Malawi stuff than other Tanganyikan fish. So you do need to still overstock them. I kind of basically think they're a bit of if you imagine a cross between like a peacock and a hap and an Mbuna, in that they kind of look similar to peacocks and haps, but they're quite aggressive and they eat the same, very similar stuff to Mbunas. Yeah, I mean, that's basically all I was going to say. And so with Tropheus, there's a few different species, but generally they do look like peacocks and haps. So, yeah.
I always sort of consider them the Mbuna of the Tanganyikan Lake.
Yeah,
And
that's a good way of describing them.
In their behaviours and their mannerisms and what they require, very similar to the Mbuna. Rock dwelling,
Yeah,
scratch off all the green stuff they can scratch off. Love to be in big numbers or need to be in big numbers. So, yeah.
that's I think the thing we forgot to say about Mbuna, and definitely counts with Tropheus, is I find you don't really have to like, you just do a water change and that's it. Like you don't have to worry about like cleaning the algae off stuff or whatever, or like gravel vacuuming or whatever, because like they kind of just do it all for you. So you just like change the water and that's it. They're like a lot less kind of effort, I find. But yeah, I mean they're kind of yeah. I think kind of the way people think about them is they're kind of like the pinnacle of Africans, I suppose, is like a Tropheus colony. I don't strictly agree with that, but that is what people think. So yeah, I know. So Ryan's back now, in case you're listening on the podcast. So I'm sure he's about to go on a 10-minute love fest of Tropheus. So I'll let him loose on y'all, and yeah, here we go. Strap in.
They look nothing like peacocks, and they're not a cross between a peacock and a half and a Mbuna. I don't know what you're talking about, but anyway.
I'm talking about how to think of them if you're a beginner. I know it's not right, but it's the easiest way to describe them for someone who doesn't know what it is.
Think of them as the ADD kid in the classroom that just keeps hitting everyone and chasing everyone around, because that's what they do.
Just think of them.
Fair enough.
They don't stop. Yeah, they're I guess the closest in behaviour to Mbuna, but they're just always moving and cruising around. They're pretty cool.
If you're watching on the YouTube, you'll be able to see them cruising around behind Ryan's head right now.
Unfortunately, the colour doesn't come out that well at this range, but those are red ones. But anyway, yes. So they're algae grazing, but I found them a pain in the ass for eating algae, so I had to put bristlenoses in my tanks because they only eat certain types of algae, actually. So it's very interesting. If you look at them in the lake, they're in a big, massive school of like hundreds of thousands, and they're all just surging around in the water, just grazing on rocks constantly. That's all they do. Eat. But as they're nipping at these rocks, they're probably getting like, a microgram of whatever. So they're just slowly
crustaceans
just grazing.
And stuff.
Yeah, and algae and all sorts of stuff. There's a word, arthrops or something like that. There's that funny word of what they're eating, but apparently it's mainly just the algae. So yeah, they need to be in large numbers. I think behind me there's probably 25 to 30 firefox in there, and it's like 2 males and the rest females. The thing I like and hate about them is I can't seem to get them to breed properly, so that's a bit of a challenge for me. So I like that. They're happy, they're healthy, they're doing really well, but I can't seem to get them to breed properly. So, and I've been keeping them for years. I've got three different big colonies and a couple of other little randoms around the place. And yeah, they're all big numbers.
When you say colonies, how many fish are we talking about here for the little viewers?
Oh, my
colony.
My Du Bois is 21 females, 2 males, I think. These ones here are probably around the similar ratio, the firefox behind me. And the bishops, I've got a few less, probably 15 or so, maybe 2 males, the rest females.
I think that's really key with the Tropheus is, I'd say, like, people say like schooling fish, but I don't think that really kind of describes it right. I'd describe them as like definitely a colony fish. Like chucking one in your tank is not gonna lead you down the path of success. Like, I find they do so much better in a big colony with like a handful of males and just a ton of females. It kind of sets you up best to kind of have success long term. Or yeah.
And and you don't have to thin out the males and females. This is something I've done for breeding. My mate's bought 50 Du Bois off me, and his tank's starting to shape up to be pretty cool now. I think you might have seen that too, Cam.
Yep.
Cullum's tank. So yeah,
I want it.
numbers. It's just about numbers. Yeah, I want it too. I wish I'd kept them myself, but anyway, I can't keep everything. Yeah, so it's just about large numbers. At least 12 to 15, big tank. They're also really, really, really what do you call it?
Good looking.
They form. Yeah. What's that?
Really, really, really good looking.
Yeah, they really they form that real good colony, that real tight knit sort of group. So you can't just stick another one in there. Like, you probably need to be sticking at least 6 in there. Or what I do is I introduce, when I want to make my colony bigger, I breed them and I introduce them at 2 to 3 centimeters.
Too small to be a threat.
Too small to be a threat, and they just chill, and then they grow up in the tank. Sometimes a fish gets kicked out of the tank, so like a male might get beaten up, and he'll be sitting on top of the tank, smashed. The only thing you can do is take that fish out and then never put it back in, basically. That's
find him a new home.
He's been kicked out of he's the weakest link. Goodbye. He's gone. You could try and introduce him again with a bunch of other fish, but he's already been weighed and tested, and he's been found lacking. So
they remember him.
That's just the way it is. Well, he doesn't fit in there for whatever reason.
As a general rule, they're black with a colour stripe or a colour marking, eh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Darker body, that sort of thing. Yeah, with different colours. Unfortunately, we don't get the big range that they get overseas. I mean, we have had them in the country.
Yeah.
But without people that are real dedicated to keeping them, they tend to just drop off one by one. People buy 6. Again, I've been there and done that. I've bought 6 at a time, and when you're buying 6 and they're $80 each, you're spending a lot of money, and then over a period of a year or so, you just end up with one male.
I think they're one though that hopefully they'll come back. I think.
Well, they've imported them recently.
Crazy expensive Tropheus, I think, are one that people will spend enough money on for it to be a viable import. So fingers crossed.
Well, I had a friend that spent 25 grand on bringing a bunch of wild caught ones in, and then someone pinched them apparently. So, maybe they're still out there. Maybe they're still out there. I don't know. Yeah, you can get rainbows and a langi and all that sort of stuff. And I've seen all those in New Zealand, but I haven't seen any for a long time. The ones I did see weren't doing very well.
What have we generally got here? Du Bois, Icola, Pemba, Red Bishops. What else do we kind of get?
They've got the Fire Fox and the Bully Point. The Bully Points you should be able to find as well if you wanted them.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
So we're at about half a dozen, give or take, available on a relatively regular basis.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. And we can get a lot more, but they have come in a couple of times. Yeah. But you've really got to find that person who's willing to spend, big money and big effort on keeping them here and breeding them.
Fine, I'll do it.
Well, there you go. Put your order in.
I'll keep my eye out. We'll see what I can do. But yeah, so along that similar vein, those would be the kind of not quite fitting Tangaikans in with the rest. But there is plenty of other Lake Tanganyika fish that I think are stupidly underrated, and anyone who knows me will know I adore shell dwellers, and they would be a prime example. But there's plenty of other, like the small Tanganyikans that are potentially not the most colourful in the world. Some of them are, but not the world's most colourful fish. But the behaviours and... You what, sorry?
Don't you dare say Julie's.
Julie's are good. We like Julie's, yeah.
I love jewelies. There's like jeweled chromis, lelupi, calvus, compressiceps, like synodontus, like the little catfish, a few different types of them. I don't know, 5-bar lamprologus. I'm sure there's more there. I can't remember. But I think they're ones that people would absolutely adore. Like people go for like things like a betta fish, like the fighting fish, because it's like, oh, it's like so interesting to watch. They got fun behavior and stuff. But like a one betta compared to like a small group of shell dwellers, no even competition in my opinion. The behaviors exhibited by the shell dwellers is just like anyone. Like you have a little 40-liter tank on your desk at work, you should put shell dwellers in there. It'll be so much more fun than better. They are, I cannot speak highly enough of them. They are fantastic little fish, and yeah, they're a bit more kind of like almost like a community type fish in terms of like the way you look after them and everything. Like you don't have to worry as much about like them just smashing each other, and they eat like they'll eat very similar stuff, all this kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of my. I know Cam doesn't like jewelies, but if you don't like jewelies, there's plenty of other cool stuff you can choose from. Like lelupi is basically like unpopular opinion. Lelupi is just a yellow jewelry, pretty much. Like all this other stuff, but yeah, that ones I think people should give more of a look to, because I think you'll get a lot more out of it than it might seem on the surface. Just looking at them.
Yeah,
So
I think they're cool. They got a bit of personality, eh?
Yeah,
They're not
like
they're not in your face, colourful, like in your like your peacocks and Mbuna and stuff like that. But they are still cool, and they have a lot of cool behaviours, especially the shellies. Like you put a pair of brevis in a small tank and just watch them cruise around together, digging holes and moving shells around, and just interacting with each other. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and like you can see like sometimes they have like the male and the female have their like marital squabbles and like all this kind of. It's like they're just so cute. I love them.
I think what you lose in the colour from the Malawi to the Tanganyikan, you get with individual personality and behaviours and shapes from them. Like
100%.
a Malawi looks like a fish per se. Tanganyikan cichlids, most of them don't look like fish, if that makes sense. They've all got their own weird little shapes and body differences to what a fish would be considered, if you kind of know what I'm talking about.
They're all very like niche fish, like in the wild. Like, you know, a shelly has found, oh, there's all these snail shells. How can I survive in this environment where there's all these other big fish trying to eat me? And like jewelies do the same thing in like little crevices in the rocks and whatever. And
it's actually,
that's so interesting to watch.
It's actually the birds that try and eat most of the shellies, I believe.
Really?
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Because they're in the shallows. They live in really shallow water. So yeah, they might get a few predators that come swim around in the shadows and try and eat them for breeding or whatever. But yeah, a lot of the time it's the birds that get them.
I thought it was the lelupi that go in and pinch out all the fry.
Do get them, yeah. But I've seen a lot of birds, a lot of footage of birds eating shellies, which is crazy.
Oh, well, that's not ideal.
That's why when
you
startle them, they dive back into their shell like a rocket, you know.
The problem I found with Tanganyikans, and Ryan brought this up to me in a conversation over months ago, is so many of them try and dominate the same part of the water column. So it's hard to keep this with this because they all want to do the same thing. Well, this predates on this and this doesn't like this. That part of the Tanganyikan world makes it quite difficult to stop. And
we just don't get the fish here to be able to create some of the cool tanks that you see overseas, you know, like and that's where we end up with Frontosa and tanks that are too small, with tank mates that are the wrong tank mates, and then tank mates that are chomped in half, you know. So
that's quite a good segue.
Tanganyikan rainbow fish to fill up the middle. That
need some sardines or some feather fins, eh?
Yeah,
bring them back.
Kill for some.
Bring them back. They used to be here. They were here legally, and they died out. And I saw them. They were cool.
Idiots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of segues us into, I think we'll say this is Cam's version of Ryan's Tropheus, is the the Frontosas, which are honestly they're just like the most stunning fish in the world. Like a big, fat, happy Frontosa group is like you've never seen anything like it, and you never will. They are just like, I mean, I can't even really think of words to describe it. It's just like awesome. So I will let you go on your little spiel, Cam, about your Frontosas and how awesome they are. So again, buckle up, everybody. Here we go.
Not going to be quite as intense as what Ryan was, but massive fan of Frontosa. They're just very graceful when you've got them, particularly in a tank by themselves or a really quiet tank. They're just graceful. They just sort of sleep through the water just real calmly and just cruise along, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So you definitely don't get that hyperactive type activity like you do from the Tropheus. But if you're not into that, then and if you want something reflective, you're good. Yeah. In my experience, you'll get one really dominant male, and he just basically controls the herd and just swims them around back and forth, up and down all day long, which is fantastic to watch.
Yeah, they do really remind me of elephants, actually. Like, I don't quite know exactly what it is, but like a herd of elephants is like the definitely the comp for them. Comparison. I mean,
not a care in the world. Like, they don't think anything's going to take them on. They know they're big. They know they're awesome. And they just cruise.
Yeah. So the problem with them is, I think, is you'll never see that really, or very seldom you see those big, graceful ones. Most commonly what you see is one real sad, beat up one in a mixed, like, African Cichlid tank with peacocks and haps and, like, big Mbunas and all this kind of stuff. And it's...
they go together.
Yeah, they just get shredded. Like, their fins get all nipped off, and they just kind of sit in the bottom behind a rock, trying to stay out the way, but the other fish don't let them. And it's kind of a different fish, really, almost like a proper, like, super happy Frontosa compared to like the sad, just hanging on Frontosa is. Yeah, it's a different fish, really, at the end of the day.
They're another fish as well. They need to be with others of their kind so they can 100%. Become one or two of them isn't going to... You're never going to get the best out of them. They're going to go black and barred and look average. And like I said, with the Mbunas, they just get ripped to pieces.
And exactly.
You really have to see them. You really have to see them, like, in their element in a big tank, like not a 1.5 meter tank, 1.2 meter tank. They need to be in a big tank, in a group with big long ventral, big long flowing ventral fins. Some subtle lighting, not like a big boom fucking,
because they're deep water fish, so not a lot of sun's going to get down there, but enough where it like kind of shimmers on them is. I've only seen that. I've only seen that once, like one time, like big, massive, happy Frontosas, and that was a long time ago, and that image has stuck with me for years and years. And I want to do it so bad, but I know I don't have anywhere, or it's not at the top of the list. But yeah, if I'm probably going to say something a bit controversial. If you feel like you need to add one to your mixed African tank, do a 5-bar Lamprologus. It's probably not the best idea. Well, it's definitely not the best idea, but it'll work out much better for you. Like, please don't do Frontosas.
I've got a 5-bar. I've got a 5-bar lamp in my 5-bar lamp in my display tank, and he's cool. He's getting along with everything, and he's happy. He's pretty happy. I mean, if you stick another one in there, he'll kill it. But he's happy by himself.
Really aggressive to their own species, aren't they?
Yeah, most
they're like,
are, but
they behave like flower horns. They're crazy things.
Yeah,
but they are awesome. And
are they the ones that the males are blue and the females are yellow, or is that a different African species?
I think that's different.
Yeah,
I think
that'd be the Ratus, wouldn't it?
No. They're Tanganyikan.
There's a Lampologus. There's a Lampologus that's like that. I think
six Fishiata or something like that.
we've got the 5 and the 6 bars that come in. But I think the 6 bars might be the ones that the females go more yellow. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I've never kept the 6 bar.
I think
I have
the
no idea.
6 Fishiatas or something similar, and they're absolute psychopaths.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I just googled it.
Yeah.
You're right. They've got a more of a yellow sheen to them.
Yeah, that'll be them.
Yeah, but so that's my unpopular suggestion is if you really have to, do that instead of a Frontosa. But I'd still say don't overall.
Or stick a blue dolphin.
So, yeah. Unless you get my big old sucky one and then just keep him by himself with all these tiny little fish and hope he doesn't get beaten up by one of them. I forgot to say as well. Oh, wait, sorry, what did you say?
Are 5 bars easy to come about at the moment, or they kind of disappeared again?
They disappeared again, yeah. I know more than one person that's bought a group of them.
Yeah.
Like 8 or 10, and then ended up with one male, even in a big tank. And so they haven't been successful in breeding them. Another guy I know had his wild caught colony in with a wild caught colony of Frontosa and went away for the weekend, and they ate them all.
Oh, no.
That is gutting.
Again, Frontosa being Frontosa.
Yeah, I guess that's something that needs to be said, that Frontosa get big and their natural diet is to eat fish. And if it's small enough, they will chomp it. And
they're nocturnal predators, so they wake up before everyone else. They're ready to go. They're like that crazy person that goes to the gym at 4 a.m. in the morning. You know, their day starts a lot earlier than ours. And
there's not really
to do a podcast.
Yeah, it's only 6 o'clock.
As far as Frontosas go, in New Zealand, there's not really anything you can keep with them, unfortunately. I wouldn't recommend it.
Dolphins are probably a good mix for them, to be honest, in terms of size, aggression, diet. I mean, not recommended, but dolphins aren't hugely aggressive. They're not going to chew them up, and they do get big enough to not get eaten, and they share a similar diet, but they do look very similar sort of shape and stuff. So I don't know if you get a lot out of keeping them together. It is.
I'm thinking and I'm hoping that Cynodontists go with them pretty well as well. Not cichlids, obviously, but I'm hoping that their combination will work okay. That's my plan.
Fingers crossed. I don't know. We'll see how it turns out. I'd say the other thing is a big old common plecos. That'll be safe, so that'll work.
Yeah, but ugly. I think it's a shame we can't get some stuff to keep with them because they are quite skittish, you know. Like and it'd be nice to put something in a bit
go a long way
to bring them out a bit and just calm them down a little bit, you know. Because I know I've had friends that said that, you know, like they had their tanks in a fish room where the fish couldn't see them coming, so they kind of walked around a corner and the fish got a fright, and he's had some Frontosa actually swim so hard into rocks and stuff that they've killed themselves, you know. So he had to rearrange his entire fish room around making sure these Frontosa could see him coming and they didn't get a fright. So they are quite skittish, you know. I guess
they are big
in a big group. They are, yeah. And that's where I don't know. I've seen at least one sort of Frontosa display tank in a fish shop over the years. Aquaworld had one. And the fish weren't going that well in there because I think there was just way too much going on for them, you know. So
because that's what I was like. I was saying how much I want them, but I'm not massively on board with keeping them in the shop just because of that reason. Of like, I did have ages ago. I did have these 2 Frontosas that I bought off someone to sell, and I had to keep them for a couple of weeks because the person who was buying them was coming from far away, and they were like in where I had them. They could always see everything. Like there was no fright being had of they didn't know people were there. But still, like maybe 5 times a day, they would freak out and just smash around and like splash water and everywhere and everything. And like that was probably the best place I could have put them. So like anywhere else is going to be worse. And obviously you want fish to be happy, not freaking out every 5 seconds. So yeah, that is the challenge with them. But if you have a quiet corner of your house, like an office or something, might be a suitable spot for them.
And
But I
in your
wouldn't put
home
them
is
in a fish stop.
in your home is probably okay. It's like if they're in the lounge or something and everyone can see them coming and going, they'll be
Yeah,
all right.
exactly.
But and if your kids don't go and start slamming stuff on the tank all the time,
Just don't have kids. Problem solved.
You'll get there, mate. You'll get there.
I think they eventually get used to the patterns of general life as well, but the irregularity of the shop just doesn't seem to work. But the group I had at home, they got used to when the family was about. They didn't skitter-osh unless, of course, one of the kids ran up to the tank and then they were gone. But the general moving of life, they seemed okay with.
And of course, the bigger the tank, the better as well. So if they can zip into a cave, or they've got somewhere to actually swim when they take a shock, is more desirable than them just smacking straight into the side of the tank.
The only problem is you need a very big cave for them.
Yes.
But yeah. Did you guys have any other sort of stuff that you guys were wanting to talk about in the African cichlid space?
I've got lots, but we've only aimed for an hour, so
I think we've scratched the surface nicely, and we can continue to go back to lots of all of these topics can be their own individual topic one day, just like everything we've done so far.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
everything can be revisited and fleshed out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the same. That's the best part about fish, isn't it? There's so much to dive into. Pardon the pun, but yeah. All good.
We're just getting our toes wet.
Yep. Yeah. Sweet. Well, do you want to? We'll record a sign off separately, I suppose.
Oh no, we'll just do it now. Just
okay. Well,
no, we've been
Ryan's
talking
going to
about.
Sign off. Here we go.
Ryan here from Three Idiots. Just today we talked about African Cichlids and how awesome they are. We're going to talk about them a lot because they're awesome. And we'll talk to you next time. I don't know what we're doing next time, but they'll tell me soon. Cheers.
See you later.